Hi, welcome everybody to this webinar. We're just waiting for people to continue joining. There's a few sort of participants still coming in at the moment. So we will get going very soon. Now, if people can give me a thumbs up just to let me know all the sound is okay and that you can hear me, and we will get started in a moment. Great, thank you very much. I can see the reactions coming in. Awesome, that's a good start. So, brilliant. Okay. Okay, so we'll get started. The webinar is recorded anyway, so if anybody does join, they will sort of continue to see that as we go through. Great. Okay. So welcome to this webinar that we're going to look at sort of elevating architectural workflows. We're going to have a look at through a lot of settings and sort of options and hints and tips as we go through in architecture and how architecture has been a key market within SketchUp throughout the years. And also, we want to talk about AI, sort of where AI is at the moment within SketchUp, but also potentially where AI sort of could be going. There's, always a lot of questions around that. And there is a lot of talk, of course, around that as well. So first of all, as I mentioned, the session will be recorded. It will be shared afterwards, and so we can see that. And what we can do in here is that we're going to have everyone muted because there's a lot of people on here from all around sort of the world actually. And we're asking people to use the Q&A in the control panel to ask questions. I like to answer as many questions as we can. It's a live webinar, so ask questions in there. If I don't get through to all questions, we'll certainly come back to it. That's why we want people to use the Q&A panel because it gets recorded, and we can make sure we do get back to you. Also, I have Ashley working sort of with me behind the scenes here, and he's going to be helping potentially with some questions as well. And so, yeah, Ashley Khan is one of our channel marketing managers, and he's certainly sort of going to be a big help on this one as well. So, a little bit about me. So, I'm a partner success manager here at Trimble SketchUp, and I've been working with Trimble for just under 5 years. I first started using SketchUp longer ago, much longer ago than that, about 2008. But I work with our resellers and our partners to basically help people make sure you get the most out of SketchUp. We want to make sure that you can get those questions answered. We like to share as much information as we can. And then when you work with your resellers and answer all the questions, because they have years of experience, and a lot of our resellers have more years than I do, they can sort of help with that and really help you get the most out of SketchUp and the products you need. So in this webinar, quick introduction about SketchUp and architecture, as I mentioned. I'm going to talk about sort of example architectural workflows using SketchUp. Also, sort of right from the beginning, that setting up, just some of those sort of things that some people overlook when they're working with SketchUp. Then we have a live demonstration. I want to show some of those things in action around a model and see how that works. And then I want to talk about SketchUp and AI. And just as I mentioned, where AI is in SketchUp at the moment and where AI could potentially be going. And then time for questions at the end. But as I said, ask questions as we go through, and potentially I can stop and answer as many as I can. Okay. So a little bit around SketchUp in architecture. Now, SketchUp was actually first developed, in 1999, but was released in year 2000 by Atlas Software. Now, SketchUp was developed by an architectural engineer and a software developer, aiming to build 3D software that was less complex than traditional CAD programs. So you've got to think in 2000, that the CAD programs there, they were big, they were heavy sort of CAD programs, and they wanted to make 3D available to everybody. And that's the message that we've kept to for basically 26 years, that we want 3D to be available to everybody. So it's really something that we have stuck with. And of course, SketchUp has changed through the years, sort of with the sort of acquisition by Google in 2006. But then the major sort of changes have come of when Trimble purchased SketchUp in 2012. And since then, the development of SketchUp has been huge around the professional tools and ability to sort of work with SketchUp in different environments, working in different programs, collaboration. And it's really sort of developed in those last 14 years. And you'll see, some of the numbers around this. And the benefits of SketchUp, we try and make SketchUp as flexible as possible. It can be customized. You can work with it exactly how you want to. We want things to be intuitive, and accurate. Uh, we often hear people turn around and say, "Oh, we don't use SketchUp because it's not accurate." I think that's, generally sort of people not using it quite correctly or not understanding how to set up because we can actually work down to, well, we can work pretty much in like micron level. And it is accurate when you are modeling there as well. And the idea of SketchUp is, really to sort of be able to create those design winning ideas as quickly as possible. Now, when we talk about SketchUp, SketchUp is the most widely used 3D modeling tool in the world. We have over 41 million professionals and hobbyists using SketchUp across many different industries. But we can see from this graph, architecture is still the major industry within using SketchUp. So over half of those 41 million people are using SketchUp for architecture. Now, these vary. We have huge architectural practices using SketchUp. We have, sort of the small business. We have, the single user architectures. So across the board, everyone really is using SketchUp from big to small. And, we have, as I mentioned, some of the biggest architectural companies in the world using SketchUp and some of the most famous ones as well. And the reason for this is because of those architectural strengths that we have within SketchUp. So SketchUp allows architects to explore design strategies, present their work, get feedback sort of with live collaboration and visualize it, to help continue move the project forward. So, those visualization and presentation of ideas really sort of, help the developers and owners of the project to move forwards without being hesitant. 2D drawings, yeah, it's great. They're still there. They're still going to be around. But 3D, 3D really sort of helps explain to everybody. It's something so my next door neighbor, they had an extension and they came to me and they knew I was sort of an engineer and they showed me the 2D drawings and they're like, we don't fully understand. And I created a quick 3D model for them of their extension. And the first thing they said was, where's that window there? It's like, well, that's what it says on your 2D drawing. And they were able to get that fixed before it went through to construction. So it's little things like that that can really sort of save that information. And this is done by a SketchUp ecosystem. Now, SketchUp is not just a 3D modeling application. People think of SketchUp and they think just that modeling application. Now, if we look in this sort of ecosystem layout here, SketchUp for desktop, whoops, sorry, wrong slide, there we go. SketchUp for desktop is just that one part there. Now, we also have SketchUp for iPad, SketchUp for web as well. This is just that one modeling part of the ecosystem. And if you have SketchUp Pro and SketchUp Studio and SketchUp Advanced Workflow and SketchUp Scan Pro, you get different parts of this ecosystem here. But within SketchUp Pro, if you have SketchUp Pro, you get SketchUp for desktop, you get layout, you get the 3D warehouse, the extension warehouse, mobile viewers, and then pre-design and Trimble Connect as well. So those collaboration tools. And this means that within all of these tools, these sort of accessible groupings, really sort of help make sure you get the right package that you're looking for. And again, this is something, talk with your resellers and they'll be able to really sort of help make sure you get the package you're looking for. And also thinking about SketchUp, when you're talking about SketchUp, we don't sit here and say, oh, it's you should have SketchUp instead of AutoCAD, or you should have SketchUp instead of Revit. That's really not how we work. SketchUp is an ally to these other software. We've discovered that we have a lot of workflows that involve multiple pieces of software. In architecture, as an architectural student, you are told that you have the right tools for the right job, whether it's a notebook, your presentation paper, your card. You have different types of paper to present different types of projects. So we look at it with the same things within software. Yeah, it's not a coincidence that Autodesk's largest customers are usually SketchUp's largest customers as well. So we have these sort of packages that work together across the entire phase of a project. So, with an architect being that sort of project manager quite often across the whole thing, we can have that. And we can see within this workflow here, we have quite a consistent area here where SketchUp appears within these different areas of a construction project. And, we have our concept development. That's a great sort of part of, within SketchUp, that visualization. But all the way through to, testing, visualization, creating virtual models for site buildings, also site planning, creating site plans and sort of BIM plans around sites. SketchUp sits in multiple places. And again, all down with the ecosystem that we have. So when we start talking about our SketchUp ecosystem, really, with working across those different design stages, it's also the different SketchUp tools that you can use. So those everyday SketchUp tools, yep, you're using SketchUp for, your project conception, the project development, visualization, potentially in V-Ray or AI or another sort of renderer, and then 3D Warehouse being able to populate your design. Taking it a bit further, looking at layout to add that documentation to the project. So, we're adding sort of more to our project, but staying within the ecosystem. SketchUp sort of start to finish of a project. So now we're sort of introducing pre-design to actually sort of get ideas for our site. And we're going to have a look at pre-design within our sort of demo as we come up. And sort of really all the way through planning that, and also built around Trimble Connect for communication and collaboration, cloud storage and collaboration comes with SketchUp. It's a fantastic tool. And now, really, there's no real reason to sort of save on your computer anymore because you have Trimble Connect with SketchUp and you can then collaborate in that project. And we'll talk around that one as well. But then we start talking, SketchUp with BIM. So, adding location data, geolocation, SketchUp Pro on the web and the iPads, being able to use that and really sort of being able to extract that information, work with other software, making sure we have all the designs for building analysis, IFC information, sort of categories there as well. So, we've got sort of the whole thing there. And as I mentioned, it's if you're just using SketchUp within the modeler, talk to your reseller and see how, SketchUp can be used more and help with this. But also, we take SketchUp a little bit further as well because we start looking at it with those integration tools around sort of the API. So the SketchUp Ruby API allows programmers to sort of link into SketchUp. That's why we have so many SketchUp extensions. There are thousands of extensions that help with modeling tools as well. But now we're also looking at, AI developing that and sort of really expanding that further. Okay. So that's, really why SketchUp is used so much in this environment. And, an example that of an architectural workflow using SketchUp And, we're talking sort of a real life example here. And we're talking about, so Chapman Taylor, they are sort of a global sort of architectural practice. They work in master planning, mixed use, residential, hospitality, transportation. They do so much. And they use a combination of tools, as we've discussed, to be able to deliver their projects. But SketchUp is one of their key tools that they use. And the reason they use Key to SketchUp because they can utilize it for concept design. So this is a real project that Chapman Design won the design competition because it really was able for them to start on sort of that visualization from the start, showing how the project's going to sit, how it's going to manage, and looking at this master plan of sitting where this project is going to be, but then all the way through with the concept design team, the CGI team, basically being able to work with it across the board. Now, this particular project, so this was part of a hotel group, and they looked at this project and how it was set up, and they then wanted the ability to be able to say, okay, we've got our structures here that's been built in Revit, ready to build. But then, people come along and say, actually, we've got a concept design that we'd like to look at for the second tower. So instead of the towers being the same, we'd like to see what it would look like within those designs. They were able to use the Revit importer to import it into SketchUp, create the design quickly, and then visualize it for renderings for that proposal. And they were able to do this within 3 days. So they were able to produce the whole rendering package to sort of present for the design within 3 days, and they won this design through this procedure. So the visuals that we're seeing, they use Enscape in this environment, but they also use a number of extensions like for planting and around the building there as well. So this was something that Chapman Taylor sort of worked with. And really sort of thinking around those different areas of SketchUp. So the intuitiveness of SketchUp means you have the interface and the modeling tools. They make it very easy to create rough massing models, visualize design ideas quickly. So being able to present those with sort of the site placement, and it means you can quickly modify and iterate those designs based on feedback, and it sort of really sort of collaborations with those. So, okay. Now, we can also take it further. So we can look at the space that we have. Space planning is a big one for SketchUp. So to be able to utilize the space that you have, whether it's that office layout, home layout, and organizing the spaces and looking at those design alternatives as well of like, okay, so we can lay this one out, they can all be the same or they can all be different, collaborate with stakeholders and work there as well. Okay. And then sort of all the way through, we can then sort of take those spaces, we can detail those spaces, help with furniture and material selection, and then actually sort of facade and structural development as well. So, all the way through to the end of that project and sort of then end up with our plans, sort of within those details as well. So there's a question coming from David mentioning, sort of scan to BIM, sort of using LiDAR. So extract features from LiDAR scans. What can SketchUp offer? We can help with that because we now have scan essentials within SketchUp. So we can actually work with scans. And I'm going to talk about that one that we can sort of work with as we go through. Okay. So getting started, getting started in SketchUp, thinking from the perspective of sort of project management and collaborating on your projects. So Trimble Connect. Now, I would recommend getting this into your workflow, thinking from Trimble Connect. And the thing is with Trimble Connect can be set up with projects. The projects can be managed with permissions. And then within projects, you can manage your folders. So you can set up these folders within your projects and you can store your files within here. So these can be projects people can view only, they can have access to them, they can comment, they can collaborate. These projects can contain the SketchUp models, they can contain Revit models, 2D DWGs, and people can view them, comment on them, and actually look. So, we can see that these projects have been set up, the model has been put into Trimble Connect, and the users with Trimble Connect can look around the model and they can actually sort of have a look at those views and really sort of set things up with that. So think about that right from the word go, and I'm going to show you how we can do that. But then if you're using Trimble Connect, this then enables, because you're on the cloud, that you can then start working with collaboration and sharing. So tools that we've introduced fairly recently within SketchUp, private sharing. So you can share a link with specific people, or it can just be a general link if you want to. But if you link with the specific people, they can then use a web browser to look at that link and then actually sort of comment and view sort of the scenes and files as we're looking. So, we're talking about commenting. It's in context, so you will see these comments coming in live. You will see where people are within the model, and you can include images within comments as well as we go through camera views and reactions as well within this sort of live collaboration. Sorry. Now, real-time viewing, it also means that the person who is in control sort of in SketchUp, if they are making updates to the model, the people that are viewing within the web viewer, they will see those live updates as well. They will see that modeling happen. So those updates get sort of transferred through there. So building from Trimble Connect, that collaboration and storage on the cloud there, great way of doing it. Okay. And then when getting started within SketchUp, we have DWG import. There's a number of extensions that can help with this, but using the 2D file within SketchUp is still a very powerful way of working. And we're going to look at this within our sort of model because you can use that 2D for, different views. We recognize the CAD blocks, we recognize sort of the 2D, and you can use it to create the walls in the 3D model as well. So it makes life a bit easier there. We've had previous webinar that we actually went through this process. So again, what I would do if you didn't come to a previous webinar and saw this, talk to your reseller. They should be able to share that webinar with you about how you can start in more detail with sort of DWG. We can also work with other files, so things like the IFC files. IFC is becoming quite a key sort of format across CAD now because people are considering long-term projects and collaboration. So within SketchUp, we have IFC classifications. We can classify models. And also, if you take a model from another piece of CAD software, export it as IFC, if things are classified correctly there, it will come across into SketchUp with that classification. Also, if you're working with Revit, and if you import a Revit model using the Revit importer within SketchUp, it will actually recognize the Revit families and classifications and organize them within tags within SketchUp. And tags are a fantastic way of organizing your model anyway. And it means then you've got sort of that collaboration there as well. So a little bit more than, even with sort of that IFC. And sort of looking at that, so within the model, we're going to be looking, so from Revit, you have those IFC parameters. They come across as parameters within SketchUp. We can report on those and we can continue to work with those as well. So bringing the model in there, that's sort of different ways there as well. And also when you're bringing those models in, we want to consider model analysis. So, shadow studies, light studies, and we have tools for that because we can look at pre-design within creating studies within pre-design. We can choose the site location where we want to place that model, and pre-design can actually generate reports to talk about sort of occupancy, summer, what shading you'll need if you want to use outdoor space. And it will give you sort of historic reports on weather around that particular area, around those studies. And we're also introducing new tools that we can actually then do advanced shadow applications. So we can look at shadow behavior within that space and use it to evaluate options there as well across different times, looking at the equinoxes, the solstice, and if we chose to sort of rotate and the ground planes around that. So, and you can see within this sort of this animation that's going, we are taking this further. So if you have SketchUp Labs, there's also some studies that we're looking at as well, and we're taking this further as we go. But we can see those studies within there, and we can actually create those advanced shadow studies within the analysis hub and produce those reports for people to show where the sun's going to sort of come through windows and again communicate that with our users. Okay, I want to get into the live demo and I want to make sure we sort of have time to go through everything. So what I'm going to do, if I'm going to go to SketchUp now and let me just go to my model here. And starting right from sort of the word go within SketchUp, what I would recommend, think about your setup in SketchUp. My SketchUp will look different to everyone else's, so please don't worry that we're sort of my SketchUp looks different. You're sort of thinking, well, you've got tools that I haven't. Yes, I may have extensions that you don't. I'm using SketchUp Studio here, which means I do have the sort of within my scans, I can bring in scans and I have the sort of options there. But other than that, I've tried to make it so that I've only got tools visible here that that you generally have. So what I would recommend is think about when you're sort of using SketchUp, really think about sort of setting SketchUp up to work for you. So some people don't always think about the SketchUp template. So when you start a new SketchUp model, it shows you those templates. You can create your own templates. So your templates, if you're doing something that you repeat every time you start SketchUp, you think, okay, well, I want it to look like this. I want to have this style. Are you working with sort of shadows? Do you need to keep turning shadows on? Do you change your styles? Um, Everything in here you can set up as a template and then say save as template. And that means you can use that every single time when you get started with SketchUp. So it means you have consistency across the projects and teams. So the template you choose determines, a lot of those model settings. So really worth thinking about, having that within your template. When you get started, I would then also recommend you have Trimble Connect and say save a copy to save to Trimble Connect. Don't want to save a copy. Actually, want to work. I'm working from Trimble Connect within this particular project. So we have Trimble Connect there. That then works within Trimble Connect and those projects and folders there as well. And again, there's more information about Trimble Connect, sort of with resellers as well. So we can sort of really make sure look at that. Now, when we start thinking about our model here, we can really sort of say, right, okay, what we want to do. Um, you know, do we want to add location, or at the time, do we want to think, well, what's our site going to be sort of really sort of used for? And I'm going to start pre-design because I want to look at the projects in here, and I've already got a project in here because I've got a study here. So location is Ely, which is close to where I live. And I've created this study for our site in Ely that we're looking at. And this starts giving me this site information here to say, well, actually, in December, this is where the sun's going to be. In June, it's significantly higher. Historical weather patterns. So we can sort of look at that impact of winds as well, generally where it comes from, that directions, the daylight, sunshine, and within the sort of architectural, yeah, in the winter, too cold to be outside. Really, you want to be outside or it's too hot. And then it will talk through those different sort of areas through the sort of through those seasons. And it even gives suggestions on outside spacing to sort of say, well, actually, if you're going to be using rain cover, yeah, you might want to consider rain cover through certain sort of times as well. So, we can download that report, we can create that report, and that's part of SketchUp. Good idea to sort of think of that right from the word go. So, we can look at that and think, okay, well, we want to consider some of that with our shading. Also within SketchUp, hopefully this isn't sort of new to people, but of course it might be. Scenes. Now, scenes in SketchUp are absolutely key because scenes in SketchUp mean that you can save a view, you can turn things on and off, you can save a style, and you'll see as I go through all of the scenes that I have set up in my model here, it's going to save me so much time around being able to say, well, look at scene so and so, my sort of different views and when we go inside and outside as well. So when I choose add location, we've got a slightly different sort of style here. And I can use add location, so I can say file, add location, or I generally have it turned on in my menu, so I've got add location turned up here. And what it will look at is it will be able to geolocate my model and say, well, okay, where is my model going to be placed? And we're looking in sort of Ely at the moment here. So, we've got my model and that's roughly where I want it to be. And if I say add context, we can choose that we want like our elevations to be included as well. And it also starts looking at creating sort of simplified 3D models that are generated from around there as well. So I'm going to include the cathedral that we have in Ely. And if I import that site context, it's going to be downloading the maps. It's going to be looking at the maps, creating the 3D buildings, and will bring that in for me within my model. There we go. So we've got my import now. If I close that, and within my tags, I can turn on my geolocation content. So there we go. We've got my geolocation. Oops, that's I've zoomed right into something there. So let's go a little further out with zoom extents. There we go. So I now have my geolocation. There's the cathedral that it's created with the simple model. And we want our house to kind of be around our idea, sort of our area here. So, we've called it House on the Hill. There's not many hills in Ely, but we do have sort of this particular information here. So I'm going to just remove the import there because we've already got this one in here. And because I have my model and we're going to be working with this. So as you can see within my scenes, I was able to turn absolutely everything off and then start looking within my model. Something else you want to look at when you're sort of working, what I would recommend is the outliner. Now, we have our tray here. So hopefully you have your tray open because most people see the entity info anyway, and also when you're working with materials. But there's a number of other things within the your tray, and you can turn these on and off. And one of them is the outliner. Now, what I'm going to do with the outliner is I'm going to sort of bring that out here a little further. And then I can choose sort of where my outliner would like to sit. And I'm going to have that over the left-hand side. Just going to make it slightly smaller so I can still see my model. And then within my outliner, this basically shows me my model structure. So when you're using groups and components, you can sort of step that down. So if I choose my ground level there, it's showing me that I've highlighted my ground floor, but we have subcomponents in here. And within my outliner, it makes it much easier to turn around and say, well, actually, do we want to just look at the equipment room? and we can select that, and it actually just selects that component for me, which is much easier than sort of clicking within those different areas. Because to select that, I would have had to select that one, double click, select that, and now, what have I selected? Um, it makes it much easier to manage. Personally, I would recommend having the outliner on all the time, sort of like this, sort of working within here as well. So, okay. So somebody said, where do we find outliner? Um, so within window and default tray, so you can choose what components you want in your tray, and you want to make sure, you have the outliner turned on. So the outliner is there, and that will turn on your outliner. Like I said, it will probably be over there, but you can move it over. And, this is something that's relatively new in SketchUp as well, that you can have your trays where you want them. So over the left-hand side or the right-hand side. Okay. Now, also within the outliner, that can also help you set up your tags as well. So tags helps you manage sort of your folders and views as well. Um, so, we're really sort of able to sort of turn things on and off within our tags as opposed to the outliner, which again helps with sort of management around that. So, within our sort of tags here, we have a number of tag folders that we can then turn things on and off. So we've organized things to say, well, actually, all of the windows, and I can simply say, well, actually, just turn off all the windows, turn off all the doors, and it's nice and easy by managing them within tags. These tags could be in multiple components and multiple levels, and it just really does make things nice and easy to turn on and off. And the good thing is about here is that, we can start sort of turning off other things as well, those ceilings and just sort of those different elements that we have. And within our sort of CAD, so we had our 2D CAD drawing to show us where our furniture sits, but for our views, we can turn that off because we don't want them on for the view here, but we might want them on for when we look at layout and our 2D drawings. And then when we look at, sort of within our IFC classifications as well, so, if we choose, so one of our doors here, and I am going to do it the way that I said, it will be much easier if you just use the outliner, which it would have been. Because this is why I've just selected too many levels down. Let's go into my door here. And then when I go into my entity info, I've got 3D swing door. It's an IFC window. And within my classification, so I've got my classifier tool turned on, we can see that we have all these different IFC classifications. And I can then choose actually that it's, specified as an IFC classifier there. And we can also add advanced attributes to it as well, such as like costings and things, because we can then use these for reporting within SketchUp. And if I go into my reports tab, scene, sorry, within my reports scene, I've just got all the windows and doors turned on. And if I go to file here and generate a report, I've created a report that is set up to give me a report on doors and windows. And within the settings, I'm not going to go through settings on this one just at the moment, but if I run this report, what it's going to do is it's going to give me sort of my doors and windows report. Oh, actually, it didn't select. I need to select all of those. There we go. That's better. Sorry, that was my fault. So now if I run the report, there we are. Hopefully there. So we've now got this full door and window report on those definition names, the materials that we're using, the quantity and the price. We could add URLs to this, and this can then be exported and used in sort of Excel as well. So, lots of information that we can create then from those reports. So using our scenes, we can then make sure that, we have our different views available. So this is great to be able to say, okay, this is what you're going to see. Sort of, we have our sort of patio area, lots of seating, bar seating, dining seating, more casual seating. How's it going to look if we add an environment? So, we can use a 3D background within our sort of SketchUp, and we can see that that 3D background there is actually sort of it is 360 degrees, and we can then use that with our materials. So if you look on the glass window, if I'm very careful there, it is actually reflecting on our window. It's an environment, and we're using our PBR materials. And again, PBR materials are something that we have discussed previously. But you can then really choose those different views. So you can have section views, you can sort of turn other things off to really say, okay, here's the plan of your house. And it really helps then with that visualization around things. Okay. So if we want to help with visualizing sort of with our sort of customers, we can start sort of saying, well, actually, this is where the bath is going to be. We can choose to visualize that. Here is your bedroom, and we can then start utilizing AI to work with helping with this visualization. Now, we have AI tools within SketchUp. So if I've got mine all turned on at the moment, so I've got my AI assistant, which if you need help is fantastic because you can just type in what sort of help you need. We have AI render. And if I have a look at AI render here, what this will do is it will look at sort of some of my settings, and I can choose a preset to say, well, actually, would we like it to be interior photorealistic or exterior photo and aerial shot? If you choose no style, it will ask for a reference image. And what you can say is that, well, I'd like a render sort of referencing, these images. Now, if I bring sort of this folder across here, I've got an architectural mood board that was created by my interior designer or even by the customer saying, these are some of the things that I would like. This is the furniture that I would like within my bedroom. And what I did within this is that I use that as the reference image. So if I add reference image, it will just let me search for that file and describe how I would like it to generate. And I describe this as saying I would like a photorealistic bedroom, utilizing the attached image as a mood board, and for the furniture that is laid out in the room on the 2D CAD. So, yeah, I had to type that, but I can see that I ran this yesterday, and that's the render that AI gave me. And looking at that with the mood board is basically that furniture that it selected, that was the light that was specified in the bed as well. So using AI render, and the reason I've set this up so that showing you a render that I did previously is purely because it takes a few minutes to do the render with AI render. So that's just really the reason there. But we can then add those renders within our sort of model here. And we can also do that for the externals as well. So we can create a render and then start saying, well, actually, how, how would that look like with a sort of a lighter brick? So we can then say, well, compare it with a dark sand or a sort of a limestone brick, and really sort of then share those models as we go through. Okay. So question, this is one for SketchUp Pro. So yeah, AI render is in SketchUp Pro. Um, the one thing, excuse me, the one thing I will say with AI render is it does use tokens, and you purchase tokens. So there's a monthly sort of token purchases. When I go into sort of AI render here, it will show me so that my credits that I have at the moment, so I have 1,400 credits left. So, but you can then send a request to be able to get those credits purchased. Okay. Now, we can also use AI render to create objects as well. And I want to talk about that sort of in the AI part when we go through the presentation. So also within collaboration, we can see there's a little icon there, which means sort of we're working on collaboration. And if I select that, so somebody has commented on my model so that, within there saying, what is the capacity of this water tank? Now, within sort of my collaboration, the live collaboration, I can find that. They've attached an image to show me the water tank that's going to be in there. They've given me a section view, and we can then sort of respond to that as well. But, again, finding out more about this live collaboration, this is in SketchUp Pro, well worth sort of asking for sort of more information about that. Okay, I know I'm going through a lot very quickly, and this is because we like to try and show as much as we can. It's not sort of ultimately sort of how to do these things in detail, because we want to show you can do it, and then actually to be able to sort of say, right, you know, um, let's do this, and then look into more details or talking with your partner. Now, with these different views, utilizing these different views, we have a number of sections through the building. We can actually see sort of our sections going through the buildings. We have sort of standard views here. So I've got my standard view toolbar on, look from the right, look from the left, and then my section plane. So you can actually display section cuts, and it will section through your model and be able to create all of these. And we've got all of our sort of different elevation models that are sort of standard views here, because we can then start using these within layout. And we've got a full layout package of our model here. So I've got 11 drawing sheets that are all linked to my 3D model, showing me those different sections, showing me those different placements of sort of our floors and ceilings and how things look. And also, just there's a report that sort of we can export, talking around some of those areas there. And, really going through all of those to sort of start showing. And these are linked to your SketchUp model. So if your SketchUp model changes, all of the drawings in layout change as well. Okay. So what I want to talk about now, so if I go back to my presentation here, and where we are with AI, utilizing sort of AI, and this is something that I wanted to show, but sort of run out of time a little bit, so I thought I'd come to my slide here. You can actually also use AI to generate an object, and use from a photo. You can simply say generate this as a 3D object. Takes a few minutes, and it will generate a model that you can then use from just an image, and it works really well. It's not a model that I would say, it's sort of made up of surfaces, and but it's something you can at least use visually there as well. And we are looking at sort of carrying on with that as well. So that sort of kind of leads into AI. So, with AI in SketchUp where we are today, so you can use the 3D warehouse with using AI, because you can drag an image into the 3D warehouse and it will show you the models that look like that within the 3D warehouse. If you're using SketchUp for iPad, you can scan your room with the iPad because you have a LiDAR scanner built into your iPad, and it will actually generate a SketchUp model of your room. And it will also recognize things like furniture, and you can turn those off with tags as well. So that's one area, sort of going back to the question that David mentioned, that you can use a LiDAR scanner. You can scan using the iPad and it will create a room. You can also use LiDAR scanners with Scan Essentials, and this can be for landscape design, this can be for an entire building, and you can bring, sort of utilize that 3D model as well. Also in SketchUp for iPad, we're using sort of the pencil to create auto shapes. So it recognizes that, to draw certain shapes, it will be a donut, it will be a cylinder, it will be an open window. So, that's being used a lot on the iPad. We have PBR materials. I mentioned about these. So PBR materials are sort of photo-based realistic materials. And we have an AI creator for these materials. So you can take literally just like a thumbnail of a material that you like, maybe it's a wooden floor, and you can use SketchUp to create a photorealistic material of that to work with these environments. AI rendering. So we can do this on the iPad, we can do this in the desktop, the way that we looked at it. But then you can utilize that sort of render and work, sort of how you want within that render. Really, the idea of the AI render is, concept. They are concept renders. So you can show people very quickly the ideas. If you want a photorealistic render of exactly how something is going to look, AI rendering does a very good job, but you might want to consider then looking at something like Enscape or V-Ray, or if you have SketchUp Studio, then you have a number of tools there that you can work with. Um, we're also looking at, so we have a connector. So there's within our connectors, we have a connector for Claude. You can start sort of describing what you want to build and how things build as well. And it then provides a SketchUp model download link. It creates that object for you. AI modeling from a picture. We mentioned about this one. So dragging in a picture and saying, I want this chair. You can generate that model and that will generate sort of our model. Um, so yeah, that one brings that in as well. So I was just reading through a question there. I was it's asked what tool do you use to make your picture into a PBR material? I will show you that in SketchUp. Very quickly. I'll try and get to the AI for this and then stick around. I will definitely show you that. Do architects usually draw architectural plans in all phases, or do they export the model to 2D to draw implementation project with all the details? It varies a huge amount. Um, Sometimes that they do draw sort of those architectural plans. But otherwise they go 3D. It very much depends on the tools they have and their workflows that they have as well. Um, okay, right, I'll carry on with this with my AI here. So we've seen that we've got some of those, the AI tools, and we know that the current AI tools, they do have some limitations, but this helps us recognize the future potential. What if AI can understand sort of 2D and 3D? What if AI can generate content in context? And this is sort of some of the things that we're looking at, and please don't, sort of expect to see these at the moment. These are just sort of those ideas where we know we want to sort of look at here. Now, this particular example is generating, an AI model from a picture. So it actually generates the model as opposed to just sort of a surface model, a visual model. This will look at and create a SketchUp model and show, ultimately a simplified model if it's available, or it will create the full model. And it gives us sort of more capabilities within sort of that modeling there. So, we can see the two differences there, but one is much more of a SketchUp model that we can work with. And the differences between, the SketchUp tool, it uses SketchUp tools to model rather than using a mesh. So at the moment, if we were to create a SketchUp model using that tool, we can see that, yeah, that's what this looks like using SketchUp. At the moment, if we said, well, create this from an image, but this is where we want to get to generate from a picture. So we create that 3D model that we can work with. Also, we can sort of this within SketchUp, sort of our Copilot here, you can actually start describing what you want to do. So, we can see those tools that we're turning off. It's literally saying add a sink basin, add a countertop, cut a window in the back wall. You're describing what you want to do instead of sort of with the modeling there as well. And with AI materials, we want to take this further as well. So, we want to sort of really look more at sort of the capabilities of creating these AI materials and actually be able to describe them, how we want to see them, how we want it to look, and it will generate that further. So it will take our generator even further, which I am going to show. We are continuously improving the AI render. We completely changed the render engine fairly recently, so we're getting much better results from the AI render. You can actually work with inside that as well, and we're always going to continue improving this. Ideally, I know the comment mentioned about sort of, a question said about sometimes the designs change when you use AI render. Yes, it does because you're saying, well, okay, it's an AI render tool. It will sometimes vary. You can use different tools within the AI render to say, well, actually, just change this part. There's these paintbrush tools down the bottom, say erase this lamppost, and you can color that lamppost and remove it. But we're sort of again always continuing working on that. And again, we're really sort of working hard to get those results as close to your model as we can. And it's coming such a long way around that. So, really see this space. 3D warehouse, we're looking at, again, being able to describe sort of the models in 3D warehouse. Just say, okay, I'd like a red sofa, and yeah, that will help me actually utilize descriptions to find models again. So natural language search will help with that. And also, extension warehouse. We want to do natural language so you can search for an extension rather than just with the names. We can say, well, actually, what extension can scatter objects across the surface? And there's, some of the obvious ones there. And it shows you. So yeah, scatter is a good one. And that's, I know, one that was using with those trees that we spoke about early on. Here's the big one that people always ask about, 2D to 3D. When can we take a 2D drawing and turn it into 3D? Uh, we're working on it, and we're sort of really accessing sort of with that. So yeah, um, you know, it's coming further, right? And that's really sort of what we want to do. Within that, and it's coming. Um, and also with BIM tools as well. So, the notion of BIM, it's explaining to a computer that 3D geometry and metadata is an element of a building. So, we take this wall, is how does the computer know that this is a wall? And what we're sort of saying is like, okay, well, we say that is a wall, but we want to be able to turn around and say, well, actually, BIM sort of AI can recognize walls and windows um, as well. So, we want that to sort of actually calculate that and classify a model automatically to say, yep, this is a column, this is a wall, this is a window within IFC. Okay. And also being able to, help design as well of like, actually, I'd like a black sofa in this room. And it's like, well, yeah, I know where sofas go. It goes against a wall and there's a space there. And, that's where I'm going to put it. And also create your own extensions using natural language, sort of being able to explain what you want to create as you go through. Okay. And, again, easy creation of extensions, being able to use natural language to explain what you want. So, that's one sort of area. Okay. Right, I'm going to go to questions. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back to SketchUp here because we've had a couple of questions regarding sort of the AI tool within SketchUp. Now, AI tool within SketchUp, yes, it's there. And if you use like the AI assistant, which is just asking for help, this will, so if I say, how do I create PBR materials? Because that was a question that that came up. So that will use the AI tool and it will give me suggestions and show how we can actually do that. So that's, the AI assistant, and that's, that is free, and that's within sort of the different SketchUp versions there. Um, so yeah, it sort of talks about our own materials and add those materials there. But what I'm going to show, if I turn off, if it lets me turn off the AI assistant, that's fine. There we go. Within my materials, now, if you see within my materials, if it's sort of a cube like that, it's already sort of saying that this is, a PBR material. And because a lot of ours sort of will be within sort of the material, so that's, a metallic sort of reflective material. But if I create my own new material, so if I say add a new material, and I can choose, my name, and if I'm going to choose a texture image, and let me find a texture image as quickly as possible. Um, there we go, wood floor, open that. So within that material, it's sort of created that as a flat image within my material, and I'm going to call that just wood floor. Okay. Now, if I click on that icon there, that uses AI and it will look at that material and then create the AI material. So it will start looking at the material and then set up some of those sort of textures. And now we've got that within our created material and it's in the 3D cube. Within my material, if I look now, it's actually created some of like a roughness map and wood floor. So you can look at that and you can use that within a material now, and it's much more realistic. That doesn't use tokens as well within the AI. Um, when you use AI, when you're using tokens, it's really getting into either object creation, which says it's, generate my model here, it uses 30 tokens, or within my AI render, it uses tokens for that as well. So within my AI render, so there's my gallery, but it tells me generate, that uses 10 tokens to generate an AI render, and I can see, I've used sort of number of those in the past, sort of working with that. Okay. But with the AI credits, have a look at that because you'll see that when you ask for credits, it's then a process to sort of have a subscription for the AI credits within sort of creating those objects. Okay, and I realized I'm now just over time. I think I've got through as many questions as I could. I know there was a couple there that were a little more specific, and there was also a couple of people that mentioned about getting copies of the webinars. What we will do, the people that have asked about that, we'll make sure sort of resellers are aware of that, and they'll, sort of get those available. But the questions that I haven't answered, we will make sure we do get answered. But the last thing, is a massive thank you from me for attending these webinars. We do get a lot of feedback around the webinars. Sometimes my feedback is I cover too much, I go too quick. It's what we try and do because I want to show as many things as possible, and also give your feedback of what you'd like in these webinars in the future. Talk to your resellers, talk to your partners, and they will come to me and say, actually, we'd like this as well. So, we try to show as much as we can. As I mentioned, the webinars, you will receive a copy of it. I just saw that come in. Thank you, James. You'll get a copy of the webinar. And you can then share that as well. So yeah, we'll make sure you get that. I think if you signed up for the webinar, you automatically get a red sort of copy anyway. But yeah, thank you so much. Apologies for running a little over time. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you next time.